When we think about crime, we often imagine modern things like robberies, fraud, or online scams. But hundreds of years ago, during the medieval period, crime looked very, very different. People lived under strict rules. Kings and the church controlled everything, and punishments were often public and terrifying. Some crimes were serious, like murder or theft, but others were just strange. You could be punished for things that today would seem ridiculous, like baking bad bread, talking too loudly, or even having a strange pet. In this video, we'll explore some of the strangest crimes in medieval times, how people were punished, and what these laws tell us about the world back then. Get ready. This isn't your usual crime story. Crime against bread. In medieval Europe, bread wasn't just food, it was life itself. For ordinary people, especially peasants, bread made up the biggest part of their daily meals. Meat was a luxury, vegetables were seasonal, but bread was a constant presence on every table. It was often eaten at every meal, sometimes dipped in broth or topped with a little cheese, but more often just plain. Because bread was so important, controlling its quality and price became a serious matter for local rulers. To ensure fairness, a strict set of laws known as the assize of bread and ale was introduced in England. These rules set the exact size and weight a loaf of bread should have for a certain price. If grain prices rose, the weight of the loaf could be adjusted, but bakers had to follow the rules closely. If a baker was caught cheating customers by making smaller loaves, adding cheap fillers like sand or chalk, or selling stale bread as fresh, the punishment was public and humiliating. They could be tied to a cart and dragged through the town, or locked in a wooden cage with their bad bread hanging around their neck. Everyone in the community would see and mock them. This was more than a simple food regulation. It was about trust. Bread was sacred in daily life. A baker who cheated the people wasn't just stealing money, they were betraying the entire community. That's why baking bad bread was considered a real crime, and punishments were designed to make an example out of the offender. Putting animals on trial. One of the strangest crimes in medieval history didn't involve humans at all. It involved animals. Yes, during the Middle Ages, animals could actually be put on trial just like people. To us today, it may sound bizarre or even funny, but in medieval Europe, these trials were taken very seriously. In France, pigs were the most common animals to face trial. If a pig attacked or killed someone, which wasn't uncommon since pigs often roamed freely in villages, the local authorities could arrest the animal. There are real historical records describing pigs being dressed in human clothes, led into courtrooms, and even assigned lawyers to defend them. Judges would hear testimonies from villagers, examine the evidence, and pronounce a verdict. If found guilty, the animal was often publicly executed, usually by hanging or beheading, just like a criminal. And it wasn't only pigs, rats, mice, locusts, and other small creatures were sometimes summoned to court for damaging crops or fields. Since these creatures obviously didn't appear in court, special legal announcements were made, and even priests performed rituals to drive them away or banish them from the area. These strange trials reveal something important about medieval beliefs. People at that time saw the world through a deeply religious and symbolic lens. Animals were believed to have a moral role in society, and crimes against humans were sometimes treated as crimes against God. Putting animals on trial was their way of making sense of a dangerous and unpredictable world. It might seem strange now, but for them, these trials were part of maintaining order, faith, and justice in their communities. Insulting the king or church. In the medieval world, words were not just words. They could decide your fate. Back then, insulting or even joking about the king, queen, or the church was seen as a serious crime. It wasn't just considered disrespectful. It was called treason if it was against the ruler, and blasphemy if it was against the church. People had to be extremely careful about what they said in public. Even something as small as making a sarcastic comment or repeating a rumor could lead to punishment. In many cases, there was no freedom of speech like we have today. The punishments for such crimes were harsh. Some people were put in the stocks in the town square, humiliated for everyone to see. Others faced more brutal penalties, like having their tongues cut out so they could never speak against authority again. And for the most serious cases, the punishment could be death. Why were the laws so strict? In medieval times, kings and queens were believed to be chosen by God. That meant insulting the king wasn't just an offense against a person. It was seen as insulting God himself. The same idea applied to the church, which held immense power over everyday life. Because of this, ordinary conversations were risky. People had to think twice before speaking their minds. A careless word could lead to imprisonment, torture, or worse. This fear kept most people silent, making power unquestionable and speech dangerous. Witchcraft and sorcery. In the medieval world, few things were feared more than witchcraft. When something bad happened, a sudden illness, a failed harvest, or mysterious events in a village, people didn't look for logical explanations. Instead, they often blamed witches. Accusations of witchcraft didn't need any real proof. Most of the time, they started with gossip, jealousy, or personal grudges. A neighbour who didn't fit in or a woman who lived alone could easily become a target. Older women, widows, or anyone who seemed different were the most vulnerable. Once accused, the situation turned terrifying. The trials were rarely fair. Many people were tortured to force them to confess to crimes they never committed. Confessions were often made just to stop the pain. After that, punishments were brutal. Some were burned at the stake, others drowned, and some were imprisoned for life. It's important to note that while the largest witch hunts happened later in history, the fear of sorcery was already very strong during the medieval period. People believed witches made deals with dark forces and could bring curses upon entire communities. This fear created an atmosphere of suspicion. Anyone could be accused, and once accused, escape was almost impossible. Witchcraft wasn't just seen as a crime against people, it was seen as a crime against God. In the end, many innocent lives were destroyed by fear, superstition, and misunderstanding. Wearing the wrong clothes. In medieval times, clothing wasn't just about style or comfort. It was a symbol of power and status. What you wore told the world exactly who you were and where you belonged in the social hierarchy. And believe it or not, wearing the wrong outfit could actually be a crime. Across Europe, rulers enforced strict sumptuary laws, rules that controlled who could wear what. These laws were designed to keep people in their place. For example, only nobles were allowed to wear silk, fur, velvet, gold embroidery, or bright, expensive dyes. If someone from the lower class dared to wear these luxurious fabrics, they could face heavy fines, public shaming, or even arrest. For ordinary people, clothing had to match their rank. A farmer or craftsman had to wear simple wool or linen, usually in dull colours. The elite, on the other hand, showed off their power with glittering fabrics, jewels, and fine shoes. Even the length of your sleeves or the size of your hat could send a message about your status. This wasn't just about fashion, it was about controlling society. If everyone could dress like the rich, the entire class system would start to blur. So breaking these clothing rules was seen as an act of rebellion, a challenge to the established order. What might sound like a small thing today, wearing a fancy coat or colourful dress, could, in medieval times, get you punished like a criminal. Weird animal laws. There were also strange rules about animals. In some towns, people could be punished if their chickens made too much noise at night or if their goats damaged someone's property. In certain places, people even had to swear in front of a judge that their rooster didn't lay eggs, because a rooster that laid eggs was believed to be cursed or connected to witchcraft. It might sound funny now, but in the Middle Ages, superstitions and the law often went hand in hand. Being dirty in public medieval cities didn't have modern plumbing or sewers. People often threw waste into the streets. But if you did it at the wrong time or in the wrong place, you could be fined. Public hygiene crimes were surprisingly common. If someone was caught washing clothes in a sacred well or throwing trash near a church, they could face punishment. The church and local lords made these rules to keep their towns clean, or at least cleaner than they would have been without them. Sunday laws and idleness. In medieval times, Sunday was a holy day. Working, selling goods, or even playing music on Sunday could be seen as a crime against God. These were called Sabbath laws. People who ignored these rules might have to pay fines, sit in the stocks, or publicly apologize to the church. In some places, even children could be punished for playing games on Sunday. It shows how religion was deeply connected to everyday life, and how sin and crime often blended together. Trial by ordeal. Medieval justice could be extremely strange and brutal. One way people were judged was through something called trial by ordeal. If someone was accused of a crime and there wasn't enough proof, they might be forced to walk across hot iron, hold a burning object, or be thrown into water. If they survived, it was seen as a sign from God that they were innocent. This wasn't a crime itself, but it shows how strange and unfair the justice system could be. Crime of being a vagabond. If someone wandered from town to town without work or a home, they could be accused of being a vagabond. In medieval society, everyone was expected to have a role: farmer, craftsman, servant, soldier. People who didn't fit in were often feared. Vagabonds were sometimes whipped, branded, or forced to leave. This shows how strict and suspicious society was. Even being poor could be treated like a crime. The medieval world was full of strange and sometimes unbelievable laws. People could be punished for the food they baked, the clothes they wore, or even for the animals they owned. Justice wasn't always fair, and often it wasn't about justice at all. It was about control, power, and superstition. Looking back, these strange crimes remind us how much the world has changed, and how different our idea of justice is today. If you enjoyed this journey into the weird side of medieval history, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell icon so you don't miss more fascinating stories from the past.